Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. Just to introduce myself quickly first, my name is Emily Brick. I am the founder of Athena Analytics. I know a lot of you, but not all of you. So just to give you a bit of background, I set up the business in 2017, and in 2019, the first Athena Tracker customer signed up in September 2019, and we've been growing since then. So today's webinar is a webinar for academic tracking post holders. So when initially people started using this software, it was very much run by the principals and the deputy principals. But we have seen this growing post holder role where there's some post holder in the school leading the use of the software. We call them the super users. And we found that has been a very successful way of running this for schools. So we decided to run this webinar, and I asked my account managers, Frank and Sarah and Patricia, to suggest people to talk to about it at this webinar, to interview with, and they came back and suggested Jane Kelly and Philip O'Brien, and they both very kindly agreed to do it. I'm not sure why, but they're here anyway. So Jane and Philip, thanks for joining us. You can probably turn on your camera now, and we'll start in a second. Hi, Jane. Hi, Philip.
Hi, how are you?
So that's why we're running these sessions, because we have this growing role, and we've a lot of questions from people around, who should be in this role, and we're thinking of bringing it in and someone doing this role. How should it work? So that's really where this has come from and why we're running the webinar. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk through the role, how Jane and Phil are doing it in their school. And then I'll ask a couple of the commonly asked questions that we get on it. If you have any questions yourself, please type them into the Q&A, and we'll try to get to them. And if it is a question that you'd like us to come back to you afterwards, please do uncheck message anonymously. I was told to tell you. Okay, so Jane Kelly from Tullow Community School, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So do you want to start off by maybe telling us what is your role in the school?
Okay, so I am an AP2 post holder. So I would have started in the role in September 2022. So my title will be academic monitor or academic tracker. It was a completely new role to the school, and the principal, I suppose, kind of gave me a little bit of free rein, I suppose, to interpret the role as however I wished, I suppose, at the start. So I did a little bit of research on academic tracking and came across yourselves, and would have looked into then kind of the background to it and so forth, and would have had a few meetings and that kind of thing, and eventually then with consultation with the management here in the school, we would have decided to go with the Athena Tracker on a kind of a trial basis. So we signed up last year with just our third years and our sixth years. So my role at that stage was basically as the admin role. So I would have uploaded all the data from VSware, which is our system that we use here. Then kind of working alongside our guidance counsellor, we would have kind of got to grips with the software ourselves first. And during the year, we would have, I suppose, rolled out or introduced the software to our senior management. So our principal, we have two deputy principals here, and to our year heads. And kind of after this, it was sort of decided then in May that come September that we would look at putting all of our students' data on for this year. And I suppose we're still in that trial process. My work this year is, I suppose, slightly different in that now I say at the start of the year I would have presented to staff at the start of the year and introduced the software to them. So I'd be managing our staff on the software. Again, I'm the, I suppose you said, the super user, in that I'm uploading all of the data from VSware. Any issues that staff have, it kind of comes back through me. But I'm also running a 6-year mentoring program, which we set up this year as well, kind of in conjunction with the use of Athena and being able to look at students' data online. So we're kind of marrying those two things together.
Brilliant. And like you've actually touched on a few of the frequently asked questions that we get. So especially when schools are starting out, I always get asked, should we get started with first years, with sixth years, with third years, or should we just go with all? So, if you were going back and starting again, would you stick with just third years and sixth years, or what do you think?
Yeah, I probably would. I mean, some schools might decide to go with, say, first years, but you're not going to have much data with those first years. We picked the exam years. The third years, when we had all of their data uploaded, we call them, we don't have Christmas or summer exams, we call them term ones and term two exams here. So we had their term ones and term twos from first, second, and then we gathered their other data then last year. And the same for sixth years, we would have had their data from, their time, in the school. So we had a lot of data to start out with, which was useful, say, for myself and the guidance counselor when we were just kind of feeling our way around the software, trying to get used to it. Whereas had we just started with first years, we would have only had one set of data really for them for the year. And I suppose you're not going to see a whole lot of trends with that. So I would definitely go up the school for where I would start.
Brilliant. Great. That's great to hear. And you said that your role has changed slightly this year in that you've now rolled it out to staff. How did you approach that rollout? Did you, tell everyone this, you're logging in and this is how you do it? How did it work?
No, we kind of took a different approach. We kind of left it open to, I suppose, presented at the start of the year. I explained the work that I had been doing the previous year. Um, I would have, I suppose, put up some examples on the board, allowed staff to have a look at some of the graphs and the color coding and that kind of a thing. But we left it open to our staff that you can kind of choose to be involved in this, or you don't have to if you don't want to. What we would be hoping is that through, I suppose, conversations throughout the year now in the staff room, and maybe the use of the tracker, say, for parent teacher meetings and that kind of a thing, that through conversations that it might filter through to more people. If they can hear a few people having used it and saying it was useful and I found it beneficial here or there, that they might buy in that way rather than been told, here's a new piece of software, you must use it, and just get on with it.
That's brilliant. No, that sounds like a great approach. And what has the general feedback been from those that are using it?
So far, really good. The I suppose what people are saying, subject teachers anyway, are saying that it's very user friendly. You don't have to be really kind of tech savvy, which I'm not myself. I'm not tech savvy, and I could kind of find my way around it fairly easily. The color coding is the both staff find it, just with a really quick glance, you can kind of see where a student is at, even though you'll probably already know where that student is at, but it just kind of confirms maybe what you were thinking already. So staff have found it very good. And the fact that for the subject teacher, it's just a case of them logging on. And the information is all there for them. They don't have to, they can choose to upload class test results if they want. But again, it's not something they have to do. But the main pieces of data are there for them when they log on.
Very good, great. No, it's great to hear. Okay, Phil, we might come to you. So Philip O'Brien from Grange Community College, welcome. So I suppose maybe to start from the start with you, can you describe your role in the school?
Yeah, hi everybody. I am a guidance counselor in my school. I'm an AP1 holder as well, and I currently have the role of academic monitoring coordinator, as well as kind of that split up with two other roles at the moment. I have PR and some year head duties as well. So yeah, I suppose the Athena for us had started a couple of, the academic tracking came to me, and then it just so happened that somebody had heard about the Athena tracker, and we started a conversation. I think it was yourself, Emily, that came in and gave us the talk then, that just before we broke for summer, and the principal decided we'd go with it. I was actually just looking before this meeting at, we have our, what would you call it? I suppose our online system of VSware, and a big appeal to us, I suppose, was the basis of the fact that you're taking the cognitive ability data and that you're basing the expectations on it. That was the real hook for us. I suppose before that, we were having conversations. We were kind of forming this academic team with a view to bringing up academic standards and expectations in the school. And somebody who'd come from the English system was kind of almost confused as to like, what's our baseline data? What are we basing our results on? And then the reporting that we're doing and the feedback to students, we're often just kind of saying, no, 70% good mark, 30% bad mark, try harder. And I suppose in learning about what Athena does in terms of talking about students reaching their potential based on the cognitive data that we already, collect, that has really changed us around as a school. I say it like a sales pitch, but it's actually true that it has kind of, we talk about the potential now. So for somebody who has very weak, quantitative ability, the 30% mark, the fact that if people are listening, if it says, if you haven't seen, maybe you have seen some demonstrations of how it works, but so if their expected result was only 25 based on their cognitive data and they got a result of 35, it's still a fail, but for them, they're above potential. And I mean, that has kind of turned around our school. I think about how the conversations we're able to have with parents, students, between us as teachers, as well. On the other end, sometimes, very high ability students, can talk about, they get 70% and we say, good effort, keep trying, and you kind of, but then the data might suggest, and Athena bringing that together to say, actually, their expected result was 85. So it allows for a different conversation where, so that, where you're saying, come on, is there something going on? How come maybe there is more effort to be put in? And obviously then a part, the Athena is just a part of our process. We obviously have a lot of like soft data, about how much, maybe there are other reasons that somebody will, their mark will be brought down. But as academic coordinator, it is, I suppose, Athena is what has made it now very meaningful for me as a role, and that's, so, I would just, if there are guidance counselors here or principals, I suppose that's the real kind of attraction to it is, what are we in the Irish system? What kind of are we basing our data on? Before it, academic monitoring in the school was sort of just, you got the results from VSware and you made it all visually put together. That was the role. Now the role has become very like, it's kind of administrative for me. I help set people up on the software. It's interesting hearing Jane's experience in the school, because I guess there's no right way to do it. It's just the correct way for your school. We decided to take a very slow approach, but that it was mandatory that you would have to use Athena if we're kind of investing in it. So for the first year, it was very much just sign up, as in actually just activate your account, as a teacher. So for me, that just involves logging into the administrator part, sending an activation email to staff, which is just a click of a button. Everybody gets that, and they set up their account. So for year one, we literally just let people explore it if they wanted. Some people, had enough on their plate. We said, let's take our time with it. Year two then was last year, which was very much then, okay, now we're going to start using this at parent-teacher meetings. The display is excellent for parent-teacher meetings. I've literally just come, another part of my AP1 Plus is a new teacher mentor, and I've just come from a meeting with them where I was explaining how we have a parent-teacher meeting next week, and I was explaining how you use it, which is basically you can have just the child's name, it's mathematics that you teach, and then the results of any in-class tests that you've done. Say, it's most helpful that way for, like, say, second and third years for us, because you've had we have a November assessment in first, and then a summer assessment. So for those parent teacher meetings, it was excellent, and the feedback we got was really good from teachers, that they kind of felt like it was a good point. It's good to be able to talk about potential. And we also send out a parent, I might be getting too much into the guidance kind of part of it, but we send out the cognitive ability parent form, so the parents are somewhat aware of cognitive ability, and then they're able to the expectations are sort of there a little bit, and they come into the parent teacher meeting, and you can, if 35% is a good result, above potential, you can have that conversation with the parent and it's accurate.
Very good. Yeah. And like, I suppose, this webinar is all about trying to help people to understand how the post would work and the role would work. So I know you mentioned an academic team. It sounds very good, but who's involved in that, and how does that work?
Yeah, well, I would say, like, as a role, it could be a difficult role if you don't have buy-in from the principal. I think it really has to be management led as well. I'm very lucky that I have another guidance counselor who's kind of very buffet with data. It wouldn't be my strong point, but it is something I'm interested in. But just, ability wise, it's one of my areas where I'm lacking in ability maybe. But so the other guidance counselor, myself as academic monitoring coordinator, a member of the teaching staff who's chairing the teaching and learning committee, and then the deputy principal and the principal are all on this academic team, which we talked about last year, and it's set up this year. So we meet every week. As I said, we kind of have an aim to sort of rise the expectations, of the academic expectations in the school. And if it was possible, I find it the biggest help, obviously, because I might prepare stuff for the meeting, but to have other people to bounce it off and other people to input, and especially management, if they are invested in it. Like I'd really recommend asking for that kind of team support. But at the other end, it might, if you're in a school where it is just, look, we're looking just to track, academia solely, we just want a different way to do it. Then, I mean, for me, the actual role of it is just setting staff up, like Jane said, how they do it in her school. I've said how we did it in our school in terms of it. I definitely would say a slow process. I mean, the most difficult part of the role for me is gone now, because it was the beginning. It was, it was just the technical part of, can you just check your email? Can you make sure that's set up? Because on your administrator window, it tells you who has set up. So I suppose, you do have to face into that little bit of a leadership thing of approaching people and saying, can I give you a hand with setting it up? That's why maybe it is a good idea just to take your time with it and not be too aspirational at the beginning.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's definitely something that, came back to us very early on in building the software, that the slow step-by-step approach was important. Jane, I'll just come back to you there. So in terms of the trainings, hopefully everybody here knows the trainings that we run. We do a super user workshop day where we invite schools that are, in that area to come and talk about how they're using the software. We've had great feedback that that's kind of how people have learned from other schools in how to use the software. I know you attended one of them, so what was your experience?
Yeah, we attended one kind of close to us here. So my school is based in County Carlow. Myself and the guidance counsellor attended one last year in Wexford, and great information at it. We got to ask lots of questions. We got to mix with other schools. But I would say one of the things that we didn't think about was a lot of the other schools that were there on the day were quite small in comparison to ourselves. So we have about 850 approximately now students here now at the minute. So the other schools that were there were quite small. So the way that they were kind of implementing the tracker into their school would have been quite different from how we may have to implement it. Like, it seemed that one person just did everything and spoke to all of the students, and which is not feasible with ourselves here. So I know that we're going to attend myself and the guidance counsellor again are going to attend some more training this year. But we've kind of looked to maybe attend in Dublin, where we might, be in with, I suppose, schools of a similar size to ourselves, so we can kind of get those, I suppose, useful conversations with, other teachers, other schools, and see what they're doing in terms of, like, we have all the data. We're at that stage where we have all the data. We have a good cohort of staff here using it, but kind of what's the next step now? What kind of things are we going to put in place? How are we going to use all this information that we have now?
Yeah, that's great feedback to get, that to keep an eye on who's at the trainings and make sure they're, similar size schools, or at least a good variation across the board.
Yeah.
And Phil, what about you? What trainings did you do?
I did the online super user course. I didn't attend any in person, but I was just able to do it. It says 4 hour. If 4 hours took, me between 3 and 4 hours. I did it over several days. I found it very helpful. You logging into the system, lessons are down. It's very straightforward. I keep it. It's actually, because it took me like 2 years. And I would say that to anybody, if you're kind of like, God, I'm not great at getting to know software. Like, it kind of seems a little bit, like any software, intricate at the start. And then once I did those 3 hours, I was confident after. I was like, okay, I actually know my way around the whole lot of it. And then it would leave my mind, and I just kept that window open on my computer, and I would literally go back in if somebody needed, like, oh, how do I pull up this? How do I look at these expectations? Whatever, it was there. So I found the online training really, really helpful.
Great. Yeah, no, that's great to hear that you found that sufficient for you in running it in the school, I've a couple of questions here for you. So the first one from Elaine, for you, Phil. Can I ask what the cognitive ability form is? And then also she's asked to explain how you found it useful for the second and third year parent teacher meetings, why you found that the most beneficial.
Okay. So, and this would be something to talk with the guidance counselor in the school about. So the cognitive ability test is something that it's called, if you've heard of the CAT4. That's something. There is that's actually run by an English company. There is some encouragement to go with the Irish, or the DATs, that they carry out. So a lot of schools use them for entrance assessment. Maybe your school does, but or we actually changed it to we use it as our entrance assessment now. We used to use it, actually just carry it out in first year, but I would say it's likely, and when I said CAT4, maybe that rang a bell or whatever, that's there. But for us, that was what made it meaningful, I suppose. Emily, would you say that that's quite an important part of it, to have
Absolutely.
the cognitive ability data?
Yeah, and in terms of which test, when we started, there was more of a mixture, but it is more and more common that it's the CAT4 now. Almost all schools using the software, that's what they're using. But I would say that's probably a terminology thing that I would say that most people here do know the CAT4s.
Yeah.
So then just to explain why you found it for the second and third year parent teacher meetings the most beneficial.
So because and it's the same reason that Jane said that she started with third years and 6 years. We actually only had the CAT4s done with first to TY. So I would kind of recommend that, maybe if or maybe it was a new school and you just have the cognitive ability test or if you had a couple of years like we did, and we only had the cognitive ability test for first to third, say, then we only brought Athena in for those, because that allows the software, based on the cognitive ability data, it predicts the results, comparing it to students with similar profiles who have then went through the junior cycle and leaving cert. And I suppose that is the data algorithm that Emily had explained to us, that then, so say like random student Emily is in first year and she's doing her November Christmas assessment. It'll give an expected result based on her CAT4, but obviously for then the parent teacher meeting, you haven't had many tests, or it's only predicted one result for her at that time. Say we're about to do so if we have our third year parent teacher meeting now, if I click on the third year student, it will look back and it'll have November assessment in first year, summer assessment in first year, then November assessment in second year, summer assessment in second year. And that's why it's really helpful, because obviously then there's a trend. You can talk, like, the student was doing really well in first year, they were reaching above their potential. And then in second year, we saw this dip, say my history teacher, I see this dip and not dip just in results, but dip, in that now they're they're performing under their potential based on the original cognitive ability data, or the CAT4. And that has brought lots to our attention. Like, it happened just with a maths teacher at the start of the year, that she said, oh, I know why that is. She had been talking to the mother, and the mother had said he had become, kind of, he had kind of went away from schoolwork, or he had given up sport, and it was an interesting way that we could actually see, because he was achieving well in first year, second year was underperforming. That's why it's so valuable in a parent-teacher meeting, because you can actually just point that out to the parent. It's not your opinion, it's based on the data in front of you. And then also it allows, and this, if there are guidance counselors here, or if you're talking about this to your guidance counselor, it gives me an avenue as a guidance counselor to pull the student in and say, I noticed that you're now under potential a bit in some of your subjects. Is there something going on? And, we all remember being in school, if a teacher does notice that about you, or that's a really powerful moment. I can see that they're like, oh, somebody really notices me. And then you might find out, yeah, actually, my girlfriend broke up with me at the start of the year. It could just be something like that, and the year has not went well. And I'll probably explain. I don't know.
No, that's great to hear. And I think it's important, because I think you said that it helped for the second and third years in particular. I suppose it's important to mention that was versus the first years, because you didn't have it for fifth year and sixth years at that point.
Sorry, yeah, that's
that makes sense. Absolutely, yeah. You have more data for those 2 year groups, yeah.
Exactly.
Jane, we have a question here about your 6-year mentoring program. So, yep. How does that work, and how have you used the Athena tracker to support you with it?
Yeah, so it's something that we've just set up this year. So again, at the start of the year, I would have met with teachers and kind of outlined, I suppose, a basic plan of what we kind of had in our heads. And just seeing basically how many teachers were interested in getting involved. And we put it out to the 6 years. So basically what our plan is, that a teacher who's interested takes on 1 to 2, maybe more students for the year. They meet at 5 different occasions in the year. So for example, our first mentoring meeting takes place next week. So they're kind of set out in next week at their mentoring meeting. They have a little booklet, and in that booklet they will basically write down all of their term 2 results from 5th year. They calculate their CAO points, and then they make a little comment about each result. Okay, and even so they might say, oh, well, I did really badly there. I had to, God, I didn't study that subject at all. Or I did really well there. I spent loads of time on that. Or, they come up with the little comment, and then they set a target grade. Then we do things like, maybe look into if there's a particular CAO course they're interested in, if there's an apprenticeship that they're interested in, and get them to, I suppose, write down the details. It focuses them, I suppose. Then they will meet again in kind of end of November. By the end of November, the guidance counsellor will have spoken to them about their CAO choices, or maybe they might, like we would have, like a big cohort here who may not go down the road of 3rd level education. They might go into apprenticeship. So we'll explore, depending on the student that you're mentoring, you explore those kind of career avenues with them. Then they meet again in January, just before the mocks, and kind of you'll be looking at study timetables and that kind of thing. Meet again after the mocks, and every time you're doing those meetings, you're looking back at the most recent set of term results. So in the January meeting, we'll look back at the term 1s, and again set targets going forward towards the mocks. Then meet again after the mocks, and the final meeting then would take place in May. Just kind of, I suppose, the last few bits and pieces, kind of tidying up things with them in May. We kind of looked at it in terms of academic, so looking at results and using the Athena tracker to help us with that. So people could choose a student themselves to work with. You didn't have to teach them. And what I have done is I've used the tutor group function on the tracker. So with the tutor group function, basically if you have 1 or 2 students that you're mentoring, you can see all of their results, and you don't necessarily have to teach them for a subject. So that's kind of what so it hasn't got up and running yet. So we're hoping to get it up and running next week.
Brilliant. And Brenda has just a follow-up question on that, Jane. Are these meetings scheduled during the school timetable or outside of school time?
During school. So, during the week, we'd all have a few free periods on our timetable. So we just contact the student and say, right, we're going to have a mentoring meeting at whatever time suits the teacher. And we've kind of put it that, you have to have these meetings within a particular week so that it's not spread out kind of over a few weeks, if you know what I mean, that it's not, there'll be disturbance for that week, but then it's over and done with until the next meeting, we'll say at the end of November.
Very good, brilliant. So we'll go back to Phil, so we'll give you a break, Jane. What, Phil, would you say you found most challenging in the role?
I mentioned just that about getting people to answer the email, just not answer the email, but just that initial stage of, look, we can all put ourselves in the position if it's not our role to do it and somebody's getting us to sign up to another thing, but I think the way, was just getting that initial setup. Once people saw that it actually isn't too daunting and our school took that approach, as in the principal said, like, this is a 3-year process, let's not rush anything. And I mean, so I would say that just the initial stage is the most difficult. And probably I see a question in there of like, who was on the academic team, trying to just figure out, and maybe another question about, where does the data go? Trying to figure out what do you, so how do you get people set up? And there's that initial phase of trying to, I suppose, as I said, approaching people to say, do you need some help? Can I help you sign into that? But once, look, it was a couple of, weeks or a month or two of doing that. And then everybody did sign up. So like that was over. And since then it has just been conversations. I mean, it may be a challenge of it. I did ask, for the help with an academic team. The people that were on that, just to say it again, were principal, deputy principal, myself as academic monitoring coordinator. I just happen to be a guidance counselor, but the other guidance counselor. So if you're not a guidance counselor, I would say it's very good to get guidance in on this. The guidance department do have a lot. They should have things invested in this. I mean, it makes their job easier and more meaningful. So there wouldn't be a reason they wouldn't, you'd hope. And then finally, it was the teaching and learning committee that we have. We have a representative from the coordinator of that from the teaching staff was on it.
Brilliant, great. And Jane, I'll come to you with that one. What would you say has been the most challenging part of the role?
Do you know what? I have really enjoyed the role so far. I think there hasn't been anything I have found too challenging. Now, I suppose, like what Phil was saying, we took a different approach in that it was left, so far it has been optional if you want to use the tracker or not. But I can imagine, all right, the chasing up of, that could lead to maybe a bit of friction in the staff room, having to chase people over opening emails, I suppose. So I haven't had that. Anyone who is using the tracker, they put themselves forward to use it. But no, I would say so far it has been smooth sailing so far, but now touch wood, now hopefully that continues.
That's good to hear. So like for you in this post, and this is a question we get a lot, is now I might not word it right, but is this Athena tracker work the entirety of your post? Are there other aspects to it, or how does it work for you, Jane?
Yeah, so I suppose it is the Athena tracker is the central part of my post at the minute. Now the mentoring is obviously part of my post as well, but the majority of the work that I do would be revolving around the tracker at the minute. Mine is an AP2, so I don't have the extra time off in my timetable. I'm still, I'm teaching a full timetable and doing this as well. I can see how it could be expanded out into so many different areas that, I mean, I would say what I'm doing at the minute is the administrative side. So I'm, putting in the data, I'm managing the teachers' accounts, and with the mentoring thing then on the side as well. So that's enough, I suppose, to keep going, you know, for an AP2 post at the minute. But I mean, you could expand it out into, I mean, what like Phil was saying about having, you know, an academic mentoring team. You could expand it out into analysis of your Leaving Cert results. You can expand it out into study skills. I mean, it's never ending. There is so much that you can do with the information that you get from the tracker. But it's just, I suppose we're still in that early stage, and it's trying to figure out what path we want to take with it. But definitely with what I'm doing, it's enough, I would say, to fill an AP2, but you could totally fill an AP1 with it as well by expanding it out.
Yeah, and it sounds like even for you rolling it out in the school, it sounds like you've taken a great approach, even that you're seeing the different areas of potential that you could expand into. And it sounds like you'll roll it out really well and use it to the best of its potential, the software. So that's great. And Phil, the same question for you. You know, I know you've kind of answered it already, but in terms of what percentage of your role does this make up? How much work is involved in it for you?
Yeah, as I said, with it's a one of three parts to my AP1 role. It's hard to say because I'm a guidance counselor with guidance hours. I allow it to cross over to the guidance, so it's, you know, so obviously I can put more time into it from an educational guidance perspective. But I really think if I was coming from it and it was just, you know, and it was my post alone without the guidance aspect, I would say getting teachers set up, it's like, well, you're asking the question is like, why are we collecting data on students? And I think often the frustration can be is that we don't use it. This year, in year 3 of using Athena, we started one of our first staff meetings on the way back, which was just, it turned out it was brilliant. It was really good. Was we let department leaders or heads of department, whatever you call them, meet with the department, and everybody could see the results. So now that does take a bit of trust, because that is one, you know, that's maybe one thing that people get a little bit, maybe not defensive, but you know what I mean? Like, maybe can people see my results? But we use VS where anybody can go in and actually look at anybody's results. So we try to have a very kind of open, collaborative environment. So that it's basically, say, let's say the maths department, they just had a conversation based on where students reaching their potential. And I mean, for us, that's enough use of data just to start conversations. So I see it, yeah, it's me getting people set up, and hopefully their own professionalism gets, you know, that's what you have to do. You have to hand it over to them and their own, you know, professionalism to want to get involved with something like that. But it definitely allows you to bring it to somewhere like a staff meeting to say, like, okay, let's use the data. Let's just have conversations. I use that example of, you know, a maths teacher noticing that a student's results, and it became kind of almost a well-being issue, but also an academic issue, as in, how can we get you back on track academically? You know, so it's the kind of hard data information being used to, as we know, schools are such, like, you know, it's the intangible stuff and the conversations that you have that often make big differences. So I've realized that that's a big part of the role, is that I've kind of gained trust in just using the data for that, the actual conversations that happen is sometimes the end result, and that's good enough, and that's very meaningful.
Brilliant, yeah, no, very good. There's a few kind of guidance related questions for you. I'll stick with you, Phil, for this. So Joan has asked, do either of you use the NGRT scores as well as the CAT4s? And someone else asked, do you also use the CAT4s done in 4th year or pre-5th year?
So yeah, we carry out NGRT with 2nd year, but we haven't actually inputted them. Emily, do you want to say, do you input NGRT?
So Jane, do you put them in NGRT? Yeah.
No, not that I'm aware. No, we don't. And we actually were kind of querying, again, the guidance counsellor here was kind of querying about doing the CAT4s again in that kind of in transition year, 5th year stage. But it's something that we were thinking about, but didn't know if it would be, does it feed into the algorithm? We weren't 100% sure, but it was something that has been brought up in conversation.
Yeah, so that is something that can also feed in once we have enough data. Like once we have enough data for any measure, then it can be added into the algorithm. So you can always just check, you know, if there's something you do want to upload, and we can let you know whether we've enough data for that specifically. So like, I mean, you both have kind of answered this, but I'll ask it directly because I mean, it is very specific. I'll stick with you, Jane. So how time consuming would you say it is being an Athena Tracker super user? Is it a weekly commitment, or is it more, and is it more intensive around assessment time?
Yeah, I would do something on it kind of every week. Now I'm kind of busier since the start of the year, because we have been trying to get staff here kind of started on it, and there's been kind of lots of questions, and because we moved more students onto it and kind of we have a high volume of students on it now, there's been I suppose issues with, say, two students with the same name and then data not crossing over. And there'd be things that I would obviously miss because I'm not on a daily basis going through the entire student cohort on it and looking for problems. It's, a teacher might come to me and say, look, here, there's an issue, I can't get data on this or on that. So yeah, at the minute I'm busier, I would suppose, than I would be last year. But I'm also using it as well in my own teaching in my own classroom. I would have sat down, I'm a chemistry teacher, so at the start of the year, I would have sat down with my 6 years and I would have showed them their data, and we would have kind of made a little plan as to how they were going to improve heading towards their term ones. But in terms of the post, busier now, but say the uploading of term one results and that, it's not it like 10 minutes and you have it done. It's not that doesn't take a lot of time. Moving the results onto the software is quite quick. But yeah, I would be doing something on it kind of every week, yes.
And Phil, same question for you.
Yeah, I would find, the question that said around assessment time, it is a little bit heavier, that it's you're obviously we pull it from our online system VSware, but there's very easy kind of videos just to follow, or a document even to follow, of just the steps to do that, of just making a CSV file and then uploading them to Athena, and it's pretty instantaneous, so it works fine. And then at the start of the year, it's pulled automatically. Maybe, Emily, you've been through that with people, but that it's, so there's no work there at the start of the year for the teachers and students and timetables, who they have. That's all done for you. So that doesn't, that's so I would say time wise, no, it's not time consuming at all for me. Yeah.
So like for some schools, I know like there's a different dynamic in terms of sometimes the Athena Tracker comes in and then the school looks for a post holder, whereas sometimes it happens the other way around. So Phil, for you, how did you end up with the software in the school? Were you there from the start and bringing it in, or how did that work?
Well, I mentioned that there was a teacher, the other guidance counselor in the school actually came from the English system, where this kind of, talking about potential and, basing things on cognitive data was kind of run of the mill. I know the English system, there's critiques of that, both positive and negative, so I won't go into any more of that, but it was interesting just hearing about her experience. And when she explained that about the data collection, then we were both kind of researching. She researched mainly, and she found Athena, explained it to us what it was, myself and the principal. And we all had just a kind of chat then with the deputy and that. And we said, like, that's when I think the principal contacted yourself, Emily, and got you in just to give us the kind of presentation on it. And then, that was that before that summer. And the next academic year, then I was academic monitoring coordinator, so it just kind of worked out very nicely time wise for me and the role.
Very good. And Jane, what about yourselves? How did you end up with it in the school?
Yeah, so for us it was slightly different in that I got the role of academic monitor, but there was nothing there previous. So I just did a little bit of research around it, and I came across yourselves, and I would have made contact and had an initial meeting or two online. My principal then would have done a bit of research and kind of suggested some software as well, and again would have had meetings, but really it was for kind of where I seen the role going, the Athena tracker kind of more suited. I was interested in the data really, and the Athena tracker really suited that, and I think it was the fact that it was so user friendly for the subject teacher, that if you wanted something to be used by a good number of your staff and to really, I suppose, make a difference to what you were doing in your school, the Athena tracker, I think, was it's that user friendliness of it that appealed.
Brilliant. And Jane, we know Phil has talked about forming an academic team, but there's a question here around, like who is involved in this with you, and how, are year heads logged in? And if so, do you communicate about this? Do you have meetings about it, or kind of how does all that work?
Yeah, so it's mainly kind of so we're, I suppose, just at the very start of year 2. So year 1, it was really just myself and the guidance counselor working on it. And at the end of last year, towards the end of last year, the year heads would have had access to it. As of yet, we rolled it out then to all staff at the start of the year. We haven't yet decided, I suppose, where we're going to go from there with it. Is it a case that we do like what Phil has said and form a sort of an academic monitoring team? Do we include year heads in that? Do we include, say, somebody like that from teaching and learning? We haven't got that far yet. And sort of conversations like this where you get to talk to other schools and see what they're doing, that's, I suppose, what I'm really interested in at the minute, because with any new initiative, you don't want to go head first into it and then, in 6 months' time go, really, we took the wrong approach there, we need to roll back on it. It's to find what would fit best for our school, and we're not there yet. We're not sure kind of where to go from here. But I would be hoping that kind of by the end of this year that we'd have a solid plan in place that we could go forward with it next year.
Brilliant. Okay, so look, we'll finish up shortly. So if there's any other questions, please send them in. I know there's a couple we still haven't gotten to, but Phil, I'll come back to you, and just, I suppose, for anyone just starting off with doing this, post, what would be your main piece of advice for them?
It definitely will be to maybe just ask who else is interested. This idea of, like, I suppose, leadership throughout the school. This definitely is a leadership role that requires that kind of but shared responsibility attitude. I think, if they see you as like, oh, that's your thing in the corner, it's very difficult to get it off the ground if you have buy-in from maybe like principal, guidance counselor, so hold a meeting with them to talk about this software, explain some of the advantages wherever your school is at, whether it's just to bring it in to talk about the potential, whether even this meeting is showing, if their cognitive ability data is lacking, that, there's an idea of maybe this conversation around bringing, the guidance counselor with the Cat 4, and then you bring in the Athena tracker and how they could work together. But yeah, buy-in from a team is really what I would say.
Very good. And then Jane, same question for you. What would be your main piece of advice for someone starting off doing it?
I would say baby steps, just go slowly. Get yourself familiar with the software first. And just, I suppose, rather than trying to implement everything all at once, maybe just have a very small focus to start off with. Like ours last year was, look, we'll have a look at it and we'll see, do we like what we see? And this year it's just about, right, we'll get the staff involved, or as much staff as possible involved, and we'll see what they make of it. And also, like, it would be my intention at the end of the year to survey the staff and to survey students actually and see what they thought of it. Did they find it useful? That kind of thing. Were the conversations that they had around the data that they seen, did they change their behavior, as a result of those conversations? So take it slowly, I would say.
Brilliant, very helpful. We have a question here about in-class tests, and like just to say from our own perspective and feedback we've had, when we, set up the software initially and we were explaining to schools how to use it and everything, we thought the in-class test would be a really important part of it. But really, like the main users and the main important feedback we've had on the software has been from those with the holistic view of students, like those who can see all of the students' results, the year heads, the guidance, those in the positions that you guys are in. But I know a lot of, it's school by school, and like some schools, all the teachers record all their in-class tests in in the software, but it is totally up to you as a school. So there's one question from Stephen about, is it possible for admin to see all the in-class tests from teachers? I think that's the question. So yes, you can if you want that setting, that's possible. So I suppose maybe Jane, I'll come to you first. And the question is, are your school using it for in-class tests? Are teachers uploading in-class tests on the software?
Yeah, they are. And I think they're doing it to, now not everybody is, but there are some who are using it I'm using it this year to upload my in-class tests purely for the point of view of parent-teacher meetings, that you have everything there on the one sort of screen. And I think it will be kind of useful if, I know I teach science at junior cert level, so we quite often be given like your in-class test at the end of a chapter. So you might have a student who has been doing really well, 70%, 80% or whatever it is on their in-class test. And then it comes around to the term ones where they might have, 7 or 8 chapters or a whole section to revise for. And all of a sudden their mark might plummet. Having that data there, is kind of backup for you. So I'm going to be using it for that for this year anyway, to have as backup, I suppose, in parent-teacher meetings.
Yeah, very good. And on the question around parents, we've one question here around how the information was shared with parents about the tracker, or whether it has been, or did that come in at parent-teacher meeting stage? So for your school, now this may be an administrative thing that went through management, so you might not be able to answer this, but Jane, what about for you, sharing the information with parents?
We haven't yet, because last year, I suppose, by the time myself and the guidance counsellor were familiar, and I suppose that we were familiar with it ourselves, our parent-teacher meetings had finished at that stage. But yes, we are going to be using it this year for parent-teacher meetings. Now we have an open evening actually next week, and I'm going to give like a sort of an informal presentation to parents there as well. So it'll, I suppose, inform them of what we would be hoping to do with it, how we would be using it. And that, but the following week then will actually be our first teacher meeting of the year, so that'll be the first time we'll be showing parents the data. But again, we've kind of left it up to staff. If you're comfortable with it, and if you're happy to share that information with parents, you can. If you don't feel you're comfortable enough with the software yet, you don't have to.
Brilliant. Okay, so look, we'll finish up because I think we've gotten to all the questions. And Phil, I might just come to you first if there's any last thing that you'd like to share about your experience, anything else you'd like to say about it.
This is the part where I'm going to get paid, is it? No, I actually would just like, you said at the start you're not sure why we did it, but honestly I agree just to do it, because it is something that I've used the word a few times, has made the data we have very meaningful here in school. So it has changed a lot about how we work. Also as well, I suppose, just as a company yourselves, I don't know how small you seem, but you seem very small and community kind of based, because I deal with Sarah, and when you contact you just with problems or how do you do this, and I was constantly just forgetting how to do things at the start. I was like, how do you upload tests again? And even though there might be a video there, sometimes it's nice to just have somebody on the other end of an email. And I mean, that day, I was always gone back to, and it's, a very informal relationship of like, and just friendly. And it's exactly what you want from, from someone you're trying to ask for help from. So, yeah.
No, that's great to hear. Sarah will be happy. Jane, same question for you now. It doesn't need to be positive,
No, in fairness, it is like it's again, you kind of asked, you don't know why we agreed to do this, but it's I'm actually, like I say, I'm really enjoying the role that I'm doing. And but part of the reason why is because the tracker has made it so easy. It's extremely user friendly and the customer service is excellent. Um it's Frank that is usually at the other end of the line answering all my questions that I would send on a weekly basis. And like that, he's back to you like really, really quickly, more than helpful. He'll give instructions, but he'll say, look, if you're too busy, I can upload this, that, and the other for you. So from that point of view, like just from conversations I would have heard here, that other software companies that might be doing other jobs in schools, their customer service can be a bit of a nightmare, but that hasn't been the experience that I've had here with yourselves.
Great. Okay, thanks a million. So lads, we'll finish there. And Jane and Phil, thank you so much. Despite the jokes about it, they're not getting paid. There's no private going on here. So really appreciate your honest feedback, because we say, even when we're talking to schools all the time, we say, just ask another school about it, because obviously we're going to say good things. So it's great to hear it from you. And really, it sounds like you're implementing it really well in both your schools. So well done. And you're great role models for everybody else in the posts. Just for everyone else, if anyone would like to do one of these, get in contact. I don't know why people agree to do it, but people often do. So if you're interested, do let me know. Like I said at the start, I don't know all of you, but the software has grown from feedback from schools, and we want to continue that. So if you do have any feedback or concerns or anything about the software or Athena Analytics products, do get on to me directly. I will share my email address in our follow-up email about this afterwards, and I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, that's everything. Any other questions or anything, just respond to our email that we'll send. And yeah, again, big thanks to Jane and Phil, and thanks for everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye guys, thanks a million.